Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online Alicization review. This one's going to be for episode 16, which is called the Osmanthus Night. And this was an excellent episode. This is definitely one of those episodes, if you've read the light novels already, where you knew them getting to this point was the turning point. As you can see by the end of the episode, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh are separated here. So basically what we get is that Kirito and Alice are falling down the side of the tower, and Yu-Gi-Oh is left up there on floor 80 with the obvious setup. We know from the intro, of course, that he is going to be facing the commander of the Integrity Knights alone. And because of what Kirito kind of does in both the last episode and also this episode, it's meant to be this kind of big moment of growth. It's meant to be this big test for Yu-Gi-Oh! He now suddenly doesn't have the person who's kind of taught him so much, has opened his mind to the world with him. We know Yu-Gi-Oh! Is powerful, but will he be able to kind of tap into that without Kirito directly there? And them adding on to that, I suppose, this extra moment of learning going off the last episode of just not, taking on your enemies just out of anger. Presenting basically Kirito's opinion on most of the people he fights, where he never, for the most part, fights or tries to hurt people out of anger or rage. He's able to see a sort of honor to who he's fighting, even if he maybe doesn't agree with it. And here, just them both kind of pointing at the fact that the knights are human. They know something has happened to them, that their memories have been altered, and that's why they have the, I suppose, negative aspect. But they are still knights, and they have honor, and that's why they're willing to kind of do one-on-one fights and not do anything that you would maybe expect from the bad guy side of things, because I suppose from their perspective, they are technically the knights of the good side. So it makes sense why they have honor, but they're still kind of fundamentally fighting to protect someone who is the overall villain of the piece. So, I thought getting that perspective from Kirito was really good to see, of just him kind of teaching that lesson to Yu-Gi-Oh! Of, like, you may feel incredibly angry about everything you've done, but like you're not directing it at the right person, and then setting up the idea of Yu-Gi-Oh! Understanding that, but also asking the question, will you be able to come up with that same reasoning against the administrator, given that she's the one behind all of this? And that's why, even though it seemed fairly random, introducing us to the elevator operator character who doesn't remember her name was actually a very notable scene to get across the idea of, like, the Integrity Knights are just doing their jobs. There's an honor to the way that they do that, and they are fundamentally just doing what they've been programmed to do. Here is, Quinella, the administrator, having set someone a job, and it's a perfect example of the flaws of this world in the way that it's set up right now, with no one able to grow for the most part. People are just set in jobs that they can never get out of, and so here's someone who's like 107 years old, but is clearly being, kept at a fairly young, visual age by Quinella's kind of magic and stuff like that, and the only time she ever stops operating the elevator is to eat and sleep. And as she says, all she knows is that elevator shaft. And then when they ask her what she would do if she was free, the best thing that she can come up with is just still using the floating platform, but just that floating platform outside of the elevator shaft. And it's just this kind of like, that's all in a way. And you understand, like, okay, she wants freedom. That's fundamentally what they're fighting for everyone to have that freedom, so that people don't get stuck in a kind of situation like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where they're just meant to cut a tree down until they're too old to swing the axe and so on. So that ended up being quite a nice situation, along with the fact that clearly that old, the only thing that she kind of knows and remembers is how to do her job. That's the only thing that she was ever asked to do, and that's all she knows. Again, bring up the idea that the soul has a limit, a memory limit, and while you can make the body last forever, you eventually, as you get older, will encounter the same problem Quinella did, that her soul is basically running out of space. That's why she had to do the copy thing. And so the idea is that usually you would die before your soul reaches its memory limit. But here she's kind of forcing people's like souls to die first. So, and that's another kind of dark aspect to this as well. I think that combined with what we learned about the two girls from last time, that she had them kill each other just to test her magic, it all builds up to this idea of like the true villain of the piece is the person at the top of the tower. And they set up the fact that, you know, there's still a chance to get her if they get there before she's kind of fully awakened. But we did get the resolution to last week's episode. We got to see Kirito's enhanced armament, basically his Shikai of his sword, to use some Bleach terminology. Very cool how they showed it. It made sense. His sword is based off the Gigas tree, and they're going with the idea that, okay, purple is sort of the energy color of that, so it's this kind of black and purple branch-like kind of stream of energy that comes out and just kind of pushes back against Finacio's attack. And I like that they just cut to her realizing that she's losing this, and just the breathe in as his attack smashes her up against the wall. Great visuals to show the impact of just how incredibly powerful it was, that she just went straight up, hit the wall incredibly hard, and was dying in the aftermath of this. Also helped to set up, I suppose, the details surrounding the very end of this episode with them blasting the wall open, but I'll get to that in just a second. And furthering on from what I was talking about earlier on with just Kirito, I suppose, seeing the sort of honor and the integrity knights, the fact that he wants to save Finacio because, I suppose, deep down he realizes that here is someone who had an actual life, and their integrity knight life is just based on the fact that their normal life, a part of their memory, was taken away from them. She's someone who still deserves to live, and, you know, basically he's kind of pointing at the idea of, like, if at all possible, we want to be able to defeat the integrity knights without killing them, because they will benefit from us winning as well. Whereas I think Yu-Gi-Oh was kind of getting lost in just, I have to do this to get Alice back, anything at any cost. So Kirito keeping that perspective, but also being kind of willing to sacrifice maybe a little bit too much to make that happen, in that he uses one of the daggers to get Finacio back to Cardinal. So she is going to be healed, kind of confirming she'll be back at some point, I assume. And yeah, then we get, of course, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh heading up to floor 80, where they meet Alice again. And this is really cool. Very beautiful floor here with the tree, the Osmanthus tree, and Alice just sitting there kind of resting in the sun. And as they approach, it's revealed that the tree she's resting against is in fact her sword, and she has such control over it, she can actually, I suppose, have her sword just exist there in its kind of ancient form. This would be like the equivalent of, like, Kirito being able to have his sword in a Gigas tree form, or Yu-Gi-Oh being able to just have, like, his sword turn into just a rose. Very cool to just demonstrate, I suppose, just how powerful she is. Because, like, we know Alice always was was one of the more skilled people at the kind of magic system of this world, so it would make sense that her as an integrity knight would also have a very high kind of skill level. And just seeing the clash between Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito and Alice was really, really great here. Even in the light novel, this fight actually gets a really good explanation, and I thought they did a really good job at actually visually showing it here. Of basically, the idea is that she has one of, if not the most powerful, legendary, artifacts in the world made into her sword, in that her sword is made from the first tree, the first, like, piece of life basically in the game. And as Kirito kind of points out, the first kind of immortal object basically. Here is the first tree. This one cannot actually be destroyed, and that's why, a trait of her sword is that it's basically kind of like everlasting, immortal type situation. And then the reveal that the power of her sword is that it's basically Byakuya Kuchiki's one from Bleach, where, like, the blade disappears, but it turns into a kind of cloud, a kind of energy kind of based thing of, like, little bits and pieces that you get hit by any single one of these, it's basically like getting hit by a knife. So his one is like shower of kind of petals, and then this one is obviously meant to be more based on the Osmanthus tree, but still, it's a super cool ability. Whereas like we've seen, Kirito's one is more of a direct attack, but maybe like it can have a little bit of range to it. Yu-Gi-Oh's one is a wide-ranging attack, but it's not like as direct as like a sword, and that he has to sort of stay rooted in the same place to do it. Alice's seems like just a near perfect attack, and that she can control it, and she hasn't even used the full, I suppose, scope of it yet. So I thought they did a really good job at showing that. Plus, just in general, where they got down to the fighting, that her sword is like a higher level than Kirito's, and the fact that every hit was just the impact was going against Kirito. He was getting forced back. Every impact just like sent him flying, and like she clearly had the advantage. And I thought that was an interesting one, because I think it's very easy to, with any of these fights, just have it be very even with the standard sword play. But I like that there was the uniqueness of her power basically kind of forcing him back, and him having to deal with that, and him only matching her power when he uses his enhanced armament. And that leads to what is the, I suppose, temporary end of this fight, with both of their enhanced armaments clashing, and it's seeming like Kirito's got the advantage here. He's managed to find a way to get the victory in this case over Alice by using his attack but targeting her sword instead. So all of the knockback would go against her sword, rather than like her blocking an attack against like her body. So he did that to send her flying backwards, and Yu-Gi-Oh goes in with the other cardinal knife, but the aftermath, the blowback from their sword, because of the way the attack was, goes against the wall. It blows out, they're sent flying out with it, and then the wall heals over before Yu-Gi-Oh can get out to them. So we're left with the end of the episode not really revealing what's happened to Kirito and Alice, and Yu-Gi-Oh potentially thinking that suddenly the two people most important to him are just gone, and he's kind of stuck in the tower where we know there are still other Integrity Knights, and he's had his moments, of course, of his power, but now suddenly he really will have to showcase just how powerful he is on his own. Can he actually fight an Integrity Knight on his own and win? So that's the major setup here. Another bit that I suppose that happened as well was the reason it was a Kirito versus Alice was because Kirito specifically said to Yu-Gi-Oh, "You don't fight," and I think you could tell that part of that was Kirito not wanting Yu-Gi-Oh to fight Alice, given that he loves her. So Kirito sort of putting himself on the line to save Yu-Gi-Oh the kind of pain of having to be involved in a direct fight against the person he's trying to save, and instead kind of playing the support role here. So once again, like it's Kirito giving all the calls. So how will Yu-Gi-Oh act now that he's been separated? But like I said, I really like this episode because it covered a lot of little bits and pieces. You had the more character-focused stuff, with the kind of odd but actually surprisingly insightful moment with the operator on the elevator, the end of the Finatio fight, the start of the Alice fight, and then a kind of landscape sort of changing moment with suddenly who knows how far down Kirito and Alice are, and what's going to happen with them. Obviously the idea is they're probably going to have to work together to save themselves from this fall and get back up and climbing this giant tower, and Yu-Gi-Oh's on his own. So that's that sort of stuff. And then there's still, of course, the stuff going on the Ocean Turtle with Asuna and so on. So that's something we can come back to as well. Plus the fact that we still have to remember that this is a game, and there's something a bit more to the game. Underworld, why is it part of like a military project? The whole AI thing, that's still at play as well. So it's important to not forget that we're not just stuck in a game. There is also some stuff happening in the outside world as well, like remembering, of course, the Cardinal explanation with the whole Wrath project and so on. So yeah, that is my review for this episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.